Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us to celebrate International Women's Day 2022. I'm sure your shoes are a little wet this morning and your hair's a little bit frizzy, but you did make it, and a lot of people obviously are not here for obvious reasons, including my EA, Helene, who's having her house flooded at the moment, which is really sad. I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors ACS for the venue, event sponsor Barry Nielsen and event supporter New South Wales Government. For those that don't know me, I am Jo Burston. I'm the founder and the CEO of Inspiring Rare Birds. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and also the lands across Australia from where our virtual audience of over 400 people is tuning in today. And I'd like to pay my respects to the Indigenous elders past, present and future. I'd also like to acknowledge some of the special guests in the room today. Of course, the Honourable Bronnie Taylor, MLC, is the Minister for Mental Health, Regional Youth and Women. Professor Marion Baird is Professor of Gender and Employment Relations and Head of the Discipline of Work and Organisational Studies at the University of Sydney. And Lisa Innes, the CEO of Diversity Council Australia. We're so very lucky to have these women with us today. My very good friend of 45 years, Wendy Lindsay, MP for East Hills. Electorate was going to be here, but the electorate's currently underwater. And so are the train lines are here as well. I spoke to her at 4:30 this morning, so it's really sad. I'd like to also acknowledge our mentors, Rare Birds mentors, Nicole Davidson, Kate Jenkins, Rare Birds Ambassador Sheila Hogan, and of course my beautiful mum, who's up the back. I'd like to talk to you briefly about International Women's Day. For me, this is a great time for a lot of reflection in particular. And I'd like us all just to take a minute just to think about all the women and girls that are really doing it hard right now. And this makes me quite emotional. The ones whose homes and belongings have been destroyed in floods. The ones sheltering the Ukrainian mothers whose children are rising and risking deaths and fighting and who may never return. And the women and girls who have lost their lives as the conflict involves civilians and not just soldiers. So just take a second to really think about these women and girls. International Women's Day is also a time to look at the status of women in Australia and where we sit in the quest for equality. Don't cry, because you made me cry. I'm very emotional today. What I can see particularly recently is that women are getting bolder, they're getting louder, and they are speaking out and they are pushing back. And I love watching this. In 2021, it marked a year in which women made it very publicly known that they'd had enough of these inequalities in this country, and particularly when it comes to how they're being treated in their workplaces. Young women like Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins show that their generation won't be intimidated by power or politics, and they stood up and spoke their truth. Incredible advocates like Sam Mostyn and Kate Jenkins brought practical ideas to our tables. Time will tell whether any of them are properly heard or whether their views will be respected and acted upon. Embodied in these women, and as many others, there is a stark truth about the status of women in Australia, and that we cannot ignore it. In the global economy, we are not the lucky country right now when it comes to gender equality. In fact, in the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report, released in 2021, its findings on Australia were frankly quite shocking. While we rank first when it comes to educational attainment, our rank drops to 70 out of 156 countries for economic participation and opportunity. That's 70 out of 156. What's worse, in 2006 we ranked 12th. Even more shocking is that when it comes to women's health and survival, we rank 99th globally. So you can see that without our great record of education, our global gender gap index ranking would be well below where it's currently at, which is still pretty shameful at 50th. The global pandemic has also caused havoc globally, with governments trying to create the perfect balance between caring for its people and protecting our vital economy. Pre-existing gender gaps have amplified this crisis asymmetrically between men and women, even as women have been at the forefront and the front lines of managing the risks and as essential workers. The hardest hit sectors by lockdowns and rapid digitisation are those where women are more frequently employed. Combined with additional pressures of providing care in the home, the crisis had halted progress towards gender parity in several economies and industries, including Australia. Since 2015, Rare Birds has been combining one-on-one mentoring, business education and networking opportunities to support women in business. That's in leadership role in corporate and running their own organisations. It is a proven and effective way of advancing economic equality, and our programs have reached and grown year on year since I founded the business in 2013. We run these programs for individuals as well as in partnerships with government and corporate who sponsor women in order to impact their diversity inclusion goals. For example, in 2021, the Department of Prime Minister's Cabinet's Office for Women provided funding for Rare Birds to deliver one-on-one mentoring, business masterclasses, and peer-to-peer networking for 90 women entrepreneurs of marginal demographic backgrounds. And these women selected for this group were either from regional or rural areas, they were migrants and refugees, they were Indigenous and Torres Strait Island women, they were living with disability or from low socioeconomic background. And scholarships like this Rare Birds program to extend nationally also bring great new mentors into the community from all areas of corporate and industry. We're very proud of the results that we achieved and the impact that we created, and for these women's businesses, also for their families and for their communities. There's such a big ripple effect there. The data is really clear and it's in. 100% of the participants in that program stated they improved their business confidence, and more than half cited significant improvement. 100% were satisfied with the mentor that they were partnered with, and 97% of them said they were highly satisfied with the person that we matched them with. And that mentor could have been a man or a woman. 97% made improvements in the top focus areas of their businesses, and 95% of the women said the Rare Birds program has helped their business to become more sustainable and better prepared for post-COVID recovery. So that's on the ground instant impact. I'll share our full 2021 impact report with you after the session, so keep your eye out on the email to come post-event. Clearly, women's economic security has been dealt a massive blow in recent years, and so I'm very, very interested to hear what else we can be doing and what we can do and what actions can be taken in the face of this crisis. The World Economic Forum report states that gender sensitivity recovery strategies will be absolutely critical in making up the ground lost during 2020 and 2021 to prevent long-term scarring in the labour market in particular. Leaders now have an unprecedented opportunity to build more resilient and gender equal economies by investing in inclusive workplaces, creating more equitable care systems, advancing women's rise in leadership positions, applying a gender lens to reskilling and redeployment, and embedding gender parity into the future of your work in every organisation. So how are we going to make this happen? It just seems like an overwhelming task, doesn't it? Well, I don't have all the answers, but there's 3 ladies here that are going to give us some insights today. No pressure. And joining me today are these women, highly esteemed women from government, industry and academia. For 20 years prior to her election, Bronnie was a registered nurse, specialising in cancer care and palliative care. Her work in these fields saw her become one of the first McGrath Foundation Best Breast Care Nurses, and then on to become the Director of Cancer Services in the Southern New South Wales Local Health District. Her political journey was that of an accidental activist, becoming involved in politics only due to her frustration with the system and its implications for regional patients. Welcome, Bronnie. Come up. Yeah. Marion was awarded the AO, the Office of the Order of Australia, for outstanding services to improving the quality of women's working lives, especially with regard to research leading to the introduction of Australia's Paid Parental Leave Act. In 2021 and 2020, she received international and national awards for significant services to industrial relations, and in 2018 and 19, Marion was named the Apolitical's top 100 most influential people in the gender equality list. Welcome, Marion. Wow. Wow. Lisa has had a long career in diversity and inclusion space across corporate, government and not-for-profit sector. And some of her career highlights are as followed, and these are just massive highlights. These are beacons, not highlights. Developing and launching the I Stand for Respect campaign, advocating for policy action in areas promoting health, safety, respect and equality for women, presenting Diversity Council Australia research at international forums, including recently at the Commission for the Status of Women. Lisa was also awarded a medal for significant contribution to the Australian Public Service for her work at the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. Welcome, Lisa, and welcome, ladies, and please take a seat. When I walked in here today, I went, we need to get rid of the stools.
Does someone say what the best way is to handle these stools? Righto, okay.
So I've got the worst dress possible for it. So, so let's start. This is a question I'm going to address to all of you, please. Let's begin with the data that I referred to, because I think we're all a bit startled by how far Australia has gone to reach gender equality. And the report ranks Australia first globally for educational attainment, but 70th for economic participation and opportunity. How do you explain this gap?
Start with... why don't you're an expert on this.
Maybe I'll start with you, Marion.
All right, morning everyone, and thanks so much, Jo, for hosting today. It's and ACS for sponsoring the event. It's an amazing morning to be here. So I think we're celebrating the fact that we can meet in person, and also showing how resilient we can be and meet the challenges that life throws at us by being here on this rainy Sydney morning. I'd also like to pay my respects to the Gadi people and the lands on whose lands we are meeting, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Well, I will start, because I am the teacher at this point, by saying the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Index is a very interesting piece of data, and I just wanted to say to you, yes, those results are accurate, but it's a report that measures the gap between women and men in each country, not the level of economic or health or educational empowerment or attainment. So there is a sort of a methodological issue to be aware of there. So yes, we rank 50th, but there are other countries above us who you would think, oh, how could that be? So it's an issue about how you measure things. Now, this is really important in any piece of work we do on gender equality. So having said that, we do have a problem in that if you compare where we are in 2021 to where we were in 2006 when they began the data, we have gone backwards in the ranking. Now, that's partly because other countries have done a lot more and improved their positions as well. The main reasons, I was studying the report last night, that we rank so poorly on our economic participation and attainment, I think are because women in Australia don't participate in the labour market to the levels that they do in many other advanced economies, and we participate with fewer hours, so we work part-time, whereas in many other countries it's full-time work that women do. And these are government targets, both state and federal, to increase women's workforce participation. Of course, there's a catch there, and I'm sure you're all aware of it. You need to have supporting policies, and childcare is the main one. The second area where Australia falls down is women on boards, in senior management positions, and in legislature positions. politics, for example. So when you put those two things together, that largely accounts for why we rank so poorly. So there is still a lot to do. But I do also just want to remind you it is a measure of the gap between men and women, not the level at which we sit around the world, if that is clear to you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you. Very clear. Lisa, when it comes to pathways for leadership for women, what plan or processes have you implemented that have worked really well that women in this room and leaders in this room can take away to their own organisations?
Thanks, Jo. And again, thank you for hosting today and for looking so glamorous when we all look frizzy hair and wet shoes. And I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal elders of the Eora Nation and pay my respect. Look, the organisation that I lead, the Diversity Council Australia, we work with over 1,000 organisations representing over 20% of the labour market. And one of the things we do is support them build their capability in this area. My key frustration is just how many organisations don't take an evidence-based approach to gender equality. And if I could urge you to do anything, it would be to resist bandwagon jumping and to critically ask questions around campaigns and movements that are all about girl power. I know it's an emotional thing that's wonderful to connect with, and as women it's brilliant that we're able to support each other, and there's a real place for that, and that's really critical. But things only change when the people who have the power and when the systems that are in place are challenged. So what we have to do is understand what things disrupt the status quo. Now, the solution to that is really complex, and it's sometimes out of the control of individuals. Sometimes it's about the policy decisions that are made in our parliament. It's about the decisions that are made in our courts. It's about the pressure that regulatory authorities impose on organisations. So all of those things matter. In terms of what individuals can do, ask questions. Resist the idea that you're the person that needs to change, and recognise actually that the key to gender equality, and one of the reasons why it's so important, is not just because it's the right, moral and fair thing to do, but because as women, your lived experiences give you a different perspective on how to solve problems in business, how to manage risk, how to create inclusive workplaces, how to ensure that decisions that are made are better decisions. And I think that the power of women at the table is actually in realising that just as we are with our lived experiences, and most of us have been experienced things like gendered harassment, possibly violence. Many of us have been primary carers of children or elderly relatives. We may or may not have been pregnant. We've had to navigate a world through our own lived experience, and that is something that is massively important to organisations, to have people around the table who've got that lived experience, because businesses operate in the real world. They make decisions affecting real people. They deal with customers and clients of both, all genders, and the opportunities in the market, in the labour market and in the commercial market are very broad and require a broad-based brush. So my advice is follow the evidence. Lean into your real experiences and try to resist the urge to shapeshift, because shapeshifting to the blueprint that is imposed by organisations for positions within the hierarchy is something that will only ever enable the status quo to prevail, and the status quo needs to change. Well said.
Wonderful. Wow.
I feel like a bandwagon
No, I love it. Stay on the bandwagon for a second, Lisa. I just want to follow on with a very quick question because you provoked a thought in me. With Inspiring Rare Birds, from day one, we invited everybody into this organisation, men and women, whatever your sexual orientation, etc., background. Now, we've got a lot of women in the room, and when we're talking to women about these things, we get a lot of nodding. How do we get the same nodding with the gents in the room in those organisations?
I mean, that's a fantastic question. I deal with people who lead organisations all the time. And the one thing I know is that men gain when women gain. This is not a zero-sum gain. Gender equality is as good for men, whether they know it or not. Rigid gender stereotypes that are imposed on women are also imposed on men, but differently, and they have real consequences for them with respect to their personal relationships, their connection with their children, their ability to manage their mental health and their well-being. Not all men want to be CEOs or sit in the boardroom. Men come from all different classes, and some of them just are struggling to earn a living. So I think it's important to recognise that we actually are in it together. To get the leaders to understand this, it's about continuing to demonstrate the business case for why gender equality will make them more successful, hopefully appeal to the moral case, but I don't think you need to even understand the moral case. What I've noticed, we've done a piece of work called Change at Work, and what we found is that most initiatives around gender equality fail in workplaces because the business case is not articulated properly, because without that you don't engage stakeholders properly. So I think it's about presenting that holistic picture. And I know there's a lot of nodding, but women are very good at organising and the collective action of women who are not a minority group, and the pressure. And you opened up with your comments, Jo, about women, becoming confident, being louder and not tolerating historical injustices. And I just think we need to keep doing that as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Bronnie, in recent address at the National Press Club, Sam Mostyn said that after consulting other members of the Chief Executive Women, she found that affordable childcare was key to increasing women's economic participation. How do we make that happen, and what measures can we take?
Yeah, look, Sam's just an incredible person, and I think that she has really mobilised a lot of people within government after they actually saw that speech. So it's been really interesting for me as the Minister for Women in New South Wales, and often for the Minister for Women, it's given to a new minister that comes in, which it was with me a couple of years ago. But when I was recently promoted and I ended up becoming the fourth most senior person in the New South Wales government, I was absolutely adamant to keep this portfolio. They didn't want me to keep it, and they wanted to pass it on.
You've made incredible progress.
Well, yeah, that was like, guys, look at the record. Let's look at where we're at. So I think as well, just to pick up on a couple of points as well, it is about having your voice, and it is about women who are able to have a platform and a profile to be able to push that. And also it's about the fact that it's all of these women that have come well before me, all of you out there with the incredible work that you've done, that I think we're now at a moment in time where we have an incredible opportunity. And I think it's all about, I always say to my team and the people that work for me, let's be really ready with the policy, and we may get knocked back 5 times, but if we're ready with that, when that door opens, we will jump through it. And I think the door is really starting to open. So what we saw with the review, and I think, look, I want to be really careful about, because I do often, say exactly what I think. So I think that, it's not for me to come up here and smash the feds and what's happening, because I think, there's lots of really good people on all sides of political parties that are there for the reasons that they believe in. I think some people are doing gender a lot better, and I think, as was said here today, when you have those voices around the table, it does make an absolute difference, because when there's not many of you, you really notice it. New South Wales Cabinet, let me tell you. But I think in terms of childcare, oh my gosh, how long have we been talking about this, And I mean, I was a nurse at Cooma Hospital, and I wanted a career because I married a farmer and I really am useless on the farm and I don't enjoy it, and I loved my career. But, it was really hard after school with the girls. Like, I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know, but, I have one child who's quite affected by sitting in the emergency department weight room. Yes, bad mother alert, for me to finish work because I had patients that needed me, that I had things to do. So the stuff that Holly's seen, she really doesn't like going into hospitals at all. But, that was what I had to do. But I'm no different to millions of other women out there. So I'm sick of talking about childcare, and I'm really hopeful that now I think the state government, we've had this opportunity where we've looked at a lot of these things, the door's open, Sam's heading up this economic review for the state, and I think that everyone's sick of, that's a federal responsibility, that's a state responsibility. So I think it's about having those conversations, and that's one of the really big things that I want to see. In saying that as well, I think it's really important that we don't forget that there's a lot of women out there that don't have children that absolutely need a lot of support to attain their best economic opportunity outcomes. But we're really determined in New South Wales. I think the door's open. I think because, as you had said, the voices are loud and they're getting more courageous and people are sticking together. And that, I think, is the absolute key here, is that when we stick together, we can achieve really good things. But we need to fix it. We need to do better, and we need to provide those opportunities. So hopefully those worlds are about to collide and we'll actually see some meaningful change in childcare reform. I'm really hopeful.
The door's open. We're pushing it open hard enough.
We just have to keep pushing,
Yeah,
right?
so.
That's exactly right. And I think
Bolt through it when it opens.
be so ready that they sort of go, whoo, what happened there? But you're ready, policy's on the table, funding is locked in, and off we go. And that's what we have to do.
Thanks, Bronnie. Marion, back to you. The UN theme for this year's International Women's Day is Changing Climates, Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. How will equality affect our economy in Australia, and how do we accelerate that process?
Okay, that's a really big question. So,
Lucky you're an academic.
I'll try and think about the things. Yeah. All right. Well, we have to make a decision about what sort of economy and what sort of society we want to live in. I really think that's critical. And that means if we get that right, and that's about climate change, but it's also about communities, it's also about the industries that we support and having an industry plan at the state and federal levels. And those, if we start to think about that, the other bits start to fall into place. Now, if we come to what affects women mostly, I've already said it's participation in the labour force. If we want women to be able to enter the paid labour force, we have to provide the childcare. That's the first thing. But the other thing we have to do is provide facilities for elder care. This is a bit of a sleeper, and I'm living it. I'm sure lots of other people are. I've spoken to a couple of people this morning. We are the generation who have increased our participation rates in the labour force the most. The 55 to 65-year-olds women are the fastest growing and biggest growing proportion of the workforce. Now, they are also highly educated, but they have children and they have parents and they have family members with disability. They are being squeezed and they are leaving the workforce. So we've got a problem with that as well. We also have to think about the sort of industries, the climate sensitive industries, those that will enable women to participate in them and work in them. This is quite a difficult area to shift, and you'll know this in DCA. Australia has a very sex-segregated workforce and a very sex-segregated industry structure. So women tend to work in the women's jobs, nursing, teaching, all the caring industries, we know that. Men tend to work in the utilities, energy, manufacturing and mining. But the shift to renewable energies actually also opens up a whole new industry structure and, if you like, jobs that women could be attracted to if we facilitate that employment pathway. And so I think here's an opportunity to really say we've got new industries coming in. Let's not just repeat what we've done traditionally. But think about, and rare birds plays a really strong part in this, think about how we create those jobs for women in the future. And that future is this year and next year. I'm not talking about 10 years' time. So I think, just to summarise, begin with what sort of economy and society. Those two go together. There's no point in having a great economy if your society is fractured. And we will have a fractured society if some people are left out, some people are not earning enough, some people don't have access to the health and wellbeing facilities that they need to thrive. So that's important. We also need to think of our industry structure and the way in which we promote jobs and how we organise those jobs. Like, that's another whole debate. What is a job? It's a series of tasks put together. It's a socially constructed thing. So we have the ability to change what jobs look like. But often we're told it's the technology or the system that tells us. You've just got to step in and say, no, it has to be done differently. There's lots more to say, but I will keep it quiet just for that.
Okay.
I hope that's enough
okay.
to get people thinking.
What I find really interesting there, Marion, is this group of 55 to 65-year-olds. I mean, there's an untapped resource there.
Absolutely.
That is being squeezed, and you can only tap into that once, because after they age, we can't go back to them.
No, that's right.
They're in a new system.
They're in a new system.
They're caring for their parents.
They're caring for their parents. The childcare system's broken. The aged care system, I don't need to tell everyone this, it is more broken perhaps. My suggestion is we need actually a new level of aged care that is proper respite care for people who are living at home, which is the policy of government, and I agree with that. But those people need a break, and their carers need a break, and they don't want to go into aged care facilities as they currently are. We need another layer that would really enable people to live a full life at home with some breaks, and their carers to work and know that they can have some breaks from that care as well.
I think, can I just quickly add something there? So I come from a little place called Nimmidigal, down about half an hour from Cooma, but that whole Snowy Mountains area, we've got aged care facilities shutting, and I cannot tell you the emails I have and people I know. This is my community, and we're having to look at moving people 2.5 hours away, and you know, for us that's 250 kilometres to another community where they know no one. And they're going to be, and this is happening all across rural and regional New South Wales, with these private NGOs coming in and actually just pulling out. I mean, you know, we have workforce shortage, we have those things, but that again, how's someone going to work when their elderly parent is 2.5 hours away, and who's going to look out for them?
Well, you know, I mean, we could get into a huge political discussion about this, but I think the funding model is wrong. I mean, that is the problem.
Wrong.
If you privatise that sector, that's the driver to close and open where it's more efficient and profitable, but that doesn't serve the community or the society. And that's what I mean. You know, we make a decision, do we live in an economy or do we live in a society? And what drives what? And that's a really good example.
Lisa, did you have something to say there?
I mean, every time I hear Marion speak, I have so many thoughts, because you provoke my thinking so much. I completely agree there's an opportunity in the renewable sector, an opportunity that was missed during the digital and tech boom. It's completely missed. The tech industry has reproduced in T-shirts the corporate structure of the, you know, blue chip organisations, and the bro culture is, and they are much more resistant to change than traditional ASX listed, NASDAQ listed organisations, because maybe they're a bit less accountable and they don't have the same regulatory pressures. I think the other thing to say about do we want to live in a society or an economy, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, has COVID taught us nothing? That we're all interconnected, that children and older people and vulnerable people, and the job of caring for them, which has fallen overwhelmingly on the shoulders of women, were the pieces that we were constantly discussing throughout the pandemic. Was anyone really thinking about what was happening on a particular mining site? I mean, I know economies are interdependent on each other, but what does it say about a society that we look at these sectors that are so integral to our lives as human beings and we think they're not worthy of the same pay? Because the way we pay those sectors matters a lot, that it doesn't have the same status, and that people who work in those sectors are subjected to such insecure employment. And if we're only driven to, I mean, part of the gender pay gap, I've done a big report on the economics of the gender pay gap. A significant component of it is made up of occupational and industry segregation. As Marion said, we're a very gender segregated economy. If all we did was focus on how we pay people in female-dominated industries, we could go a long way in reversing the economic disadvantage that women have over their lifetime.
I'm going to stay with you, Lisa. It's been noted that rebuilding our economy post-COVID, we need to apply a gender lens in order to increase the opportunities for women. But until now, the government support has been skewed towards new infrastructure and high-vis workers. How else might we stimulate the ability for more women to go back to work and improve the economy at the same time, and improve their families and improve community?
Well, I think
I've been listening, see?
If you haven't watched Sam Austin's press club address on the care economy, and where she's sick to death of seeing politicians in high vis with hard hats and actually wants to see them in hospitals, at childcare centres, at schools, and how the care economy, I mean, I can't quite exactly the value of it, but it's astronomical. If we put our, I mean, the path to gender equality is about enabling women to have genuine choices. So if they want a career in STEM, then they can have a career in STEM. But what often happens in that conversation is that STEM careers, which are vital and important, are elevated above careers in the care economy, which are vital and important. And we have to recognise that it's investment has to go in that, and the career, not just the career path, but the care economy is a part of the economy that we have to take very, very seriously, and recognise that jobs in that economy are integral to everyday life. And actually, if those parts of the economy fail, it's much more serious than if other parts of the economy fail.
I'm just thinking about so much at the moment, so I'm processing as you were talking. I'm going to ask a very complex but simple question to all three of you. What do you say to your male colleagues who want to be an ally for women in the workplace? How do we encourage this?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, look, I'll start because I'll be pretty quick. Really, look, I came from a very female-dominated industry in nursing to a very male-dominated industry in politics, and wow. I still find it staggering. So this week, actually last week, I had my budget estimates, as when probably most of you aren't interested, but it's when we get grilled by the opposition and by everyone about, what we're doing and how we're doing our job. And I was getting pretty fairly patronised by someone, and I actually, I'll say very directly, the Labor Party's much better at gender equality and things than the Coalition, and they have some really fabulous women. But anyway, this guy, he was really having to go at me. I've actually been made the new Minister for Regional Health, a few issues there, but ready to tackle it head on. And he was just trying to say, oh, but you're a junior minister and you're, whatever. And I said, well, actually, I'm the fourth most senior minister in the New South Wales government, and I'm actually the most senior woman. And he turned around, this is like, it's all televised and everything, and he goes, don't you play the gender card? And I said, what? And I was really calm, which I'm usually not. The great thing about being over 50, you suddenly get this sense of don't mess with me, buddy, seriously. And I said, I just said, do you want to withdraw that? And he just went, no, because you did. And I said, I'm simply stating the facts. And the person that came in to defend me was one of my own colleagues, but also a lady from the Greens called Kate Fairman. And people often think that, we don't all get on. And she said, I'm sorry, but that's not okay. And anyway, he wouldn't withdraw it. And then, it didn't happen until the end of the inquiry when another male colleague of his came up and said, mate, you better withdraw that because she's going to go all the way and everybody's talking about it. And, and then they planted a terrible story to try and deflect from that. But I just thought, wow, here I am. I'm at the peak of my career. And I was saying to you earlier when we were just sitting there that I think I was very naive when I, came into politics. I wasn't a member of a party. I'm not one of those people that's worked for a politician. I've just had this rise because I felt really strongly about my patients in Cooma because they were having really terrible health outcomes. And so now I find myself here. And if you talked to me before, I would have said, well, that's going to be great because it's going to be really respectful and, all of that. And look, it's just not. And so I suppose my role is, I find it really interesting when, my male colleagues will say that to me. Very few are very genuine. And look, sorry, that's just the honest truth about it. And, lots of egos, I don't know how these guys fit through the door sometimes with the size of their egos. But, it doesn't make them bad people, as you said. But I don't know. All I know I can do, and I'm really resolute about this, is that this is a moment in time and I intend to use it very wisely. And I intend to keep calling it out. And I find it really interesting on the eve of Women's Week that there was one reporter that actually wanted to talk about it, and I look at that footage of how he spoke to me and it's like, seriously, who would put up with that? So I don't have the answer, and now I'm just very brutal, and I think that in some ways a lot of them are a bit fearful of me, but that's a good thing, I reckon, and I'm going to use that as well as I can, not for me, but for all of the people that I choose to represent, and that's all the women in New South Wales, and I take that really seriously, and I think all of us have a moment where we have this opportunity and we just have to use it wisely, but I don't have any answers. I don't know. We just need more women at the table, and we're failing that really, really badly in my party. So I just have to keep trying to do better. But I'm not having huge success at the moment, but I won't give up.
So last I'll ask the question again to you, Marion and Lisa, but just to preface this a little bit too, I've had all those brutal situations as well, Bronnie, and they're brutal, but you do, as you get older, you give less, right? Yeah. But last year on International Women's Day, we did run an event to help, to bring men into the conversation, to really help them understand how to confidently step into our conversations, and a lot of them just actually didn't know what to do. They felt quite intimidated, and clearly, but politics is a different, boxing ring. But the result of that event was that so many more guys contacted us to be a supporter of rare birds.
Oh, there you go. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So how do you, Marion and Lisa, go about those guys that really want to do but don't know how to, or really want to say but don't know how to? How do you sort of help them become your allies?
Well, I'm going to answer it slightly differently, which maybe not what you expected,
That's
but
all right.
Based on some research we did. And it may be useful then to think about how, because it goes exactly to this point. We surveyed and interviewed young men and women in Australia, a national survey, nationally representative. This was in 2020 now. And then we analysed all the data. And one result really stands out. What we're finding is that with that generation, this is between 16 and 40-year-olds, men and women with children think very much the same about gender equality, workplace policies and what they want. Women without children also think similarly to men and women with children. The group that don't and that really do not have gender equality on their radar are young men without children. So it seems to me from the research, and their results were quite different, that there is a turning point. What happens when young men think about family responsibilities or have children, they start to change their view about the world. Now, the other thing that happens, and Lisa will know this from the corporate world, we've had that story for years. Until the CEO has a daughter, he won't understand the need for gender equality policies. But the other thing that's happening is that those young men are partnered with or married to young women who have a career in mind and are working full-time, and they're not going to take it anymore. Yes. So I think there is a shift happening already, and they're the group that you really want to bring on board. So what do you say to them? Exactly what Lisa said. Gender equality is good for everyone. It's not just good for women, it's good for men and women, and it's good for our children and our society. I'll come back to that again. And so I welcome them. I do notice with my younger staff members who have young children that they are very aware of the male members of staff, very aware of gender equality issues, and they are quite willing to put their hands up and support. So I don't go overboard and thank them, oh, how wonderful. I just take it as par for the course. That's what you should be doing. You know, just come along and do it. Behave properly. So my last, behave properly, coming back to your...
Quoting you a lot
that's okay.
today.
I want to just congratulate you on where you've come from and what you're doing and the world that you're now operating in, because it's not an easy place. Kate Jenkins spoke at our IWD event last night. You know, she has done terrific work. Respect at Work is the name of the report. I really am urging all governments, Queensland's adopted it for their public sector commission, that we have an objective, and I know it's only a piece of writing, but I think people start to respond, and it gives ammunition for leaders. Every workplace act, every workplace should have respect at work is our fundamental principle, and that should be in the New South Wales government policies or documents, our Public Service Commission, and it should be everywhere, and we should say it, because respect at work is about respecting women and men. It's about respecting the value of the work that everybody does, and then it will flow through to other policies. I mean, it's words, we have to make them actions, but at least you start with that statement.
Absolutely.
Challenge accepted.
Great. I'll send you my little piece on that for you.
Please.
What I see there is that, you know, D&I and equality policies are not just for the workplace, they're for the home place, they're for your life place. They have to flow.
Well, in fact, another thing I always say to students, if you think about how many hours in your lifetime, where are you going to spend most of your time now? It's in the workplace. Gender relations are made in the workplace. They then flow home. We used to think gender relations were made at home and they come to work, but gender relations are made. That's where people experience what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a man, and that flows back. That's what our young people learn when they go into the workplace. So if we don't do it right in the workplace, we're not going to do it right in the home.
Lisa, what are your thoughts?
So I think if all men did was call out other men,
That's true.
the lives of women would change overnight. If when you hear an off-coloured joke or someone is being inappropriate with you at a party, or if you're, I mean, I have 3 daughters, so I'm hearing their stories. And if, say, a man said, oh, you can't take a joke, I was only joking, smile up. If another man said, not funny, mate, the behaviour would stop overnight. Women getting angry, women resisting behaviour actually doesn't change men as effectively as if other men called them out. That's the reality of it. Men respect each other. And I think if they could do one thing, it's to call out each other's bad behaviour. First, they have to see it, though. And often they don't see it. There's really concerning. I mean, I'm encouraged by your views that men's attitudes are changing, especially when they have families. But there is concerning research, the University of Canberra research about young men's attitudes, especially around things like sexual harassment, violence and consent. The impact that things like internet pornography are having on the shaping of human sexuality and what that means for the interaction between young men and young women and how that flows on. I mean, these are things, nothing exists in a vacuum, and I just think that we have to recognise that there are lots of things shaping attitudes. So men have to be able to see everyday sexism, but if they can see it, if they call it out, the lives of women will change overnight.
I'm in awe of you three ladies.
I've learned a lot today.
I'm very conscious of time, and that I know, Bronnie, you've got to move out of the building pretty quickly. I'd like to first of all say an enormous thank you to these three ladies. The wisdom, the knowledge, the lived experience. I think we just sort of didn't even scratch the surface. And then we're going to open the floor for a few questions before we wrap up. So first of all, thank you ladies for just what you've brought today.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Yeah.
And while you've got these three brains trust in the room, is there any questions that you'd like to ask?
Okay. Hi, I'm an organisational psychologist. I do leadership coaching, and I'm very passionate about manners and that phrase, behave properly. How do we get people to do that? I'm horrified the way people talk in Parliament. I heard of a school group who were not allowed to enter Parliament House in Canberra because they were too young to hear the language that was used. How do we shift that? It's just sort of old-fashioned manners of how you get interested in someone's world, be curious about their lives and what they want, and say hi and thank you, and
Yeah, look, I agree, and I think my second year in Parliament, I chaired a youth parliament, and they were all doing the same thing. And I was like saying, no, order, let's just go back, and this is actually, but what you see is how you behave. And I think what's happened is that, and look, I used to say this as a cancer nurse all the time when I do, screening education and things, and say, don't let abnormal become normal. So, that's one on your hand that's been there, that then is there for 3 months, suddenly becomes normal. It's not normal, it's abnormal. Behaviour in Parliament is abnormal. You would never get away with that in the corporate sector, speaking to, and that really happened to me when I first came in. And my brother-in-law is a federal member of Parliament, and he can be, a lot of people might not like his views and things like that, and because of my last name, when I got married, I didn't keep my maiden name, and so I really got attacked on a really personal level. I found it very difficult to manage, extremely difficult, because they can go after you, but when they start to go after your family, it's really hard. All I can do is I try very hard in the chamber to behave really well and to call people out when they behave really badly, but they constantly they use the excuse that it's the Westminster system, and so the Westminster system of government is, adversarial. And I think that's why it affects a lot of women as well that don't want to come in, because there's a lot of shouting and a lot of yelling. And although I'm loud and I can shout and I can yell, I don't like it. It's sort of not, and it's not because I'm proper or I just don't respond to people shouting at me very well. And I think men do, and so it actually suits them a lot better. But I'm really not sure. I think the more women we have, the better that behaviour will get. But in saying that, some of the women are pretty bad too. So I'm so sorry, but I don't have an answer for you, and I really wish I did, because the really incredible thing about being in the upper house, where you work on committees and you work a lot closer together, you get really fantastic outcomes, and no one sees that. And, a lot of people will say to me, oh, no, you need to do that in question time, Bronnie, because people love the theatre. And I said, seriously, what planet do you live on that you think people want to see us shouting at each other? And I wish that people could see more that when you get all different political parties working together on committees to come up with really good recommendations, you get really good outcomes, and that's what's really powerful. But we don't see that. But I just think I have to keep talking about it and doing that. But it's really disappointing, isn't it? And it was really disappointing for me watching that youth parliament, because that was the next generation that's meant to not want to do that. But sorry if that was depressing, but, honesty.
Is there any other questions in the room?
Thank you. What a brilliant discussion and what a great way to kick off International Women's Day. I'm Hayley Foster and I'm the CEO of Full Stop Australia, and one of our services is Statewide Sexual Violence Helpline. Love all of your work. The first question, I was going to initially say, how do we actually tackle that in Parliament? Like, what are some actual ideas around how we can stop that? Because, working in that workplace and then coming back to raise our children, we're trying to teach them not to do that, and that's all they see. So I'm curious about ideas for that. But also, I was really struck by the conversation about the caring workforce and valuing the caring workforce compared to, people working in iSTEM, for example. And the fact that that cuts across everything. So if you are a chief executive in a caring industry, you might be trawled out as an expert on that subject matter. There's a discussion happening on a panel on the drama or the project or whatever. You have an industry body representative from business, and they do the same, but they sit and have the conversation because they have something else to contribute. So I'm just wondering about if you have any reflections around that. Probably more so you, Lisa, but yeah. So Elise, sorry, yeah.
I think it all gets back to the whole implementation of the Respect at Work framework. We've advocated really strongly on, there were 17 legislative recommendations, 5 of them, this is federally, 5 of them for changes to both the Sex Discrimination Act but also to the Fair Work Act. 5 of them were taken up, others were not taken up, some are still under consideration. I'm actually participating in a roundtable today with the Department of the Attorney General. I think the one recommendation that could transform everything is the idea that we treat workplace behaviour the way we treat occupational health and safety. So this recommendation that we impose a positive duty on employers. And the positive duty means it's your obligation to create respectful work environments. So you don't wait for the injury to happen. We train people on hard hats and how to lift things in the office. Because if we wait for the workplace injury, it's too late, the injury's happened. We know with disrespectful behaviour, including things like sexual harassment and violence, that most people don't report. So if you're waiting for the complaint, you miss out on the fact that it's happening and you only address the complaints. But the culture of the organisation's been eroded anyway. What a positive duty would do, and leading practice employers are already doing positive duties, is they are working to create respectful environments. Respectful environments are more likely to happen where there's gender equality in a workplace, when there are equal numbers of women and men in leadership in Parliament. We know that that influences respectful interactions and creates respectful workplaces. We know respectful workplaces happen when jobs are designed properly, when people can fulfil their potential, when they have human connection with one another. We know that the policy framework needs to be in place. We also know that when people are held to account strictly, that helps. So none of this, Netflix and Atlassian both have policies that I love called No Brilliant Jerks. And what that means is if you're a rainmaker but you behave badly, you're out. And it doesn't matter, because in the end, that rainmaker will cost you more money. So the positive duty approach is actually good for business. A lot of businesses are probably nervous of it because they think more bureaucracy, more red tape, more reporting, but actually they'll benefit in the long run, because if you approach workplace respect the way you approach workplace health and safety, not only will you get people experiencing the workplace better, but you'll be a more productive, innovative, successful organisation.
Brilliant. I am going to say that's the end of questions. If you are using social media today, if she can, I can is our hashtag, and IWD 2022, obviously, and Build Back Fairer. Inspiring Rare Birds is Inspiring Rare Birds HQ if you're on any other handles, but you'll find us anyway. So please share what these women have talked about today. The more ears and eyes we get to, the further we can go through that door and the more change we can make together. So again, thank you so much, ladies. I'm just in awe of you. It's been an inspiration, and it's a an amazing way to start International Women's Day for me as well. So from my heart to yours, thank you.
Thank you.